you find someone talking about spiritual awakening, I often ask, what are you awakening to? And if they start saying, oh, well, it's too hard to put into words, the guy doesn't know what's going on. If you're really clear on these awakenings, you will be able to articulate the 7 key spiritual awakenings.
Yeah.
Like the first awakening is that you have a soul. Originally, it looks like, from a materialist point of view, like you're just a body. And that when you die, that's it. You realize there's a spiritual dimension to this world. It's actually the source of it all. And then the other awakening continue to unfold, this bliss that can hold all human emotions is available, regardless of outer circumstances.
Welcome to Beyond Perception. I'm Simon, coach and your host. My guest today is Thomas Razzeto. Thomas, you are a spiritual teacher, an author of the book Living the Paradox of Enlightenment, and you're a friend of Timothy Conway and Jeroen Wedenbos, both past guests on this podcast. It's my joy to be here with you today. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me, Simon. I'm pleased to be here.
And it's obvious I would like to talk with you about spirituality today, and especially what you might see different than other teachers or teachings.
Yes.
And you shared your book with me, Living the Paradox of Enlightenment. And maybe that could be a good start. What does enlightenment mean to you?
Well, there's no standard definition that everyone uses about enlightenment. So I worked with Timothy Conway quite a bit on the general overall picture of this spiritual development that goes on for the person. And so I distilled it down. It's a little bit different than the language that he likes to use, but in my book and in my essays, I mentioned that enlightenment has 2 components to it. Being fully awake to who you truly are, your true self, as this open awareness, the one self that arises as all apparent selves. And then the second component is being completely free of any selfish or self-indulgent tendencies and actions, things like that, attitudes. Those 2 things together is what I think constitutes the most of enlightenment. And it is the person who becomes enlightened. It's not your true self that becomes enlightened. Your true self is this open awareness. It's not a thing. And I like to use this word awareness. Awareness. What is awareness? It's the capacity to perceive. It's this openness that is for experience. Being open to experience. So experiencing something and witnessing something are the same thing, perceiving. But who you truly are is this power of sentience that is doing the perceiving. But it itself cannot be perceived because it is not a thing. It is not a phenomena. So you, as your true self, does not become enlightened. Your true self is what enlightens all beings. But your person, your personality, your humanness is what becomes enlightened. Your personal consciousness, your soul, is what gets polished up and brought up to higher and higher vibrations, higher levels of spiritual understandings. And that's what becomes enlightened. And that's why I say there are many paradoxes, but one of the main paradoxes is that you think that you're going to go around and become enlightened. And it's true that who you thought was you becomes enlightened, but you have an identity shift. And you discover that there's something that's behind it, something that's unchanging, something that cannot be enlightened or unenlightened. And you see what I mean by that? You can open that up to explore it a little more.
And when you say to be or become completely free, is that even a possibility within personhood?
Yes, and I've certainly, and that's another good point, is I do not consider myself enlightened. fully enlightened because of these things. I can see that I have, it's like a stone that's being polished. I still have rough edges. I still have some of these tendencies that might become frustrated or, anxious. Or although most people that are engaging in spirituality at this level have refined themselves to a great extent, although some of them could still be people that are inclined to power. You know what I'm saying? Self-grandizement, bringing attention to yourself and things like that. But most of the people that are students that come to these things are really pretty good people. They're kind, they're considerate. You know what I'm saying? So I would say that I don't know if it's possible for others, but I will say that I have not completed this process of either one of those, fully waking up. I mean, as this contemplation and this sitting with the idea of I am pure awareness. I am the unchanging source of all of reality. This is a very deep, deep understanding. And it can be deepened by certain personal experiences. Jeroen and Timothy are both experiencers of samadhi, a very deep meditative state. This is not my path just yet, but in this state, you essentially deconstruct some of the person. The personal consciousness is dissolved to a large extent. There's still something in the body, so that if you shake it, it'll come out of the deep trance of samadhi. It's very much akin to deep dreamless sleep, although in deep dreamless sleep you're not awake to the process. So samadhi is still being alert and awake and sentient. And so by the dissolving of the person, you see that the person is not fundamental. The person is not fundamentally you. And when I use this phrase fundamental, I like to use the metaphor of the actor and the character, because the actor comes forward as the character. But the character is not who the actor is fundamentally. The character can be dropped, and the actor is still the actor. The actor does not lose anything that's essential to the actor. It's just an extra mode of activity. So the character, although we notice when the actor comes forward as the character, they are one, because the character does not have any substance of its own. All of the substance of the character is the substance of the actor being presented as the character. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, and what I also find interesting is that you really make a point about differentiating between awareness and consciousness.
Yes, yes. And Timothy taught me that, and he said it's in the ancient literature, and I said, oh, okay. Now, one of the things, consciousness is a much more complicated subject, but one aspect that consciousness brings forth, and we'll talk about human personal consciousness, the consciousness of Thomas, the consciousness of Simon, is that it provides a perspective, a viewpoint into our physical world, because Thomas is a physical being, you are a physical being. So we're just going to talk about what focuses in the physical world. So in this, to experience it, we have a perspective, a viewpoint, a vantage point, not just of the five physical senses, the eyes, the ears, etc., but also there is an inner sense. I can see my thoughts. I can feel my feelings. I can sense my intuition, and so on. There are many inner phenomena that can be sensed. But this is unique to this person. There's been a distinguishing of this experience from your experience. When I bite an apple, I taste it, you do not. So there's an apparent separateness of the phenomena of the persons, even though both of them are arising as an extension of the one awareness that is arising. It's like an emanation, this formless, and when I use the word formless, I mean cannot be perceived. Source awareness is formless, and yet it emanates into the world of form, and as such it constructs both viewpoints and the objects that are being viewed. When I say objects, I don't mean just physical objects. I also mean Oh, every phenomenon that can be imagined, including illusions, dreams, emotions, thoughts. Any phenomena that can be perceived needs a perspective from which to perceive it. And so this formless source awareness is arising as that. And in this is the construction of consciousness. And they say that the first emanation is universal consciousness. So complete formless awareness emanates as universal consciousness, which then later works and brings forth all these other things, such as families of the mammals and so forth, and all the way down to distinguishing into a soul, a human soul that's expressing itself here on the planet Earth. And even that soul is bigger than what is my personal consciousness, because when my personal consciousness is dissolved, I step back into a human soul. And it's my human soul that chose to express itself as Thomas, being born, choosing my parents, things like this, which is an experience that this personal consciousness doesn't remember, because this personal consciousness is not what made that choice. It's the soul, the greater entity of Thomas. But eventually it all goes up, all comes from source awareness.
So then from there follows that any experience is always subjective?
Yes, I would say that that's true. You have to say, from this perspective, my experience was. And then there can be some generalizations of this, but people make a mistake of generalizing too much. They say, oh, this experience happened to me and you're telling me about an experience, so we must have had the same experience. And it may not really be the same, but it truly can have much overlap. And that's a good thing, because it can really help unify us as a family, as a group of humans, and opens up to compassion, empathy, things like that.
And you write also about in your book that you asked Timothy, your teacher, if there's
Yes.
an objective reality. And I think he said that that's not a good question to ask or explore.
It's funny how it is, because when I first went to Timothy, I didn't really know what to expect. My friend said, I'm going up to Timothy's. Oh, it's right here, right now, and it's free. And I said, well, okay, I'll go. That's Jerome comes from halfway around the world. I come from a few miles away in Santa Barbara, But anyway, I go up there and I always had these pressing questions. And I've done a lot of spiritual work, and I've been reading a lot of channeled material and attending a lot of channeled events. And so I wasn't a complete beginner, but it is this question. This seems like such a real world, right? A vividness to the outer world. And people kept saying, no, the world it's an illusion, So I asked him, is there an outside world? Is there really an objective outside world? And he didn't say yes or no. He said, this question does not lead to liberation. And I thought, oh, okay. Because as a scientific type of mind, I'm looking for all the questions and I want all the answers. And then I had to reprioritize it, say, what is really important to me? Is it liberation? If it's liberation, then I can let go of not knowing this. And I said, this is very liberating to me, to not have to know. And yet at the same time, it opens up a little bit about knowing that the objective experience, it's a seeming, and it's perfectly valid to use the language. I'm going to go to the beach today, and I'm going to get in my car, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to travel through what seems like an outer space from my person. And so that's all very functional. It's all very practical. And a wise man, a spiritual man that really opens up, or woman or child, they all know that practicality is really important, because to come to a spiritual truth that has no practicality, where are you with that?
And what I'm hearing from you, like you said, liberation, and connected it with this letting go of knowing or desire to know. But then also you mentioned that there emerged a different kind of knowing.
Yes.
So are there two ways of knowing? Is there a rational knowing and an intuitive knowing? How do you see that?
I really think that that's an important question, because they're both tools. And as you work with your tools, you realize that each tool has its strengths and its weaknesses. And to deny one in favor of the other exclusively limits you. And so I really think some people talk about there's a battle between your heart and your mind, and that one has to conquer the other. And you realize that these are given to you to serve you in your unfolding. And they both serve you beautifully, because your mind is what you can use as you deal with the world. You have many things that are just dealt with logic and comparisons and things like that. But your heart, your intuition, brings so much to you. It gives you your inspiration. Where shall I go with my life? Where shall I go with my life today? Your inspiration is very important, but you do not figure out what your path is. You feel it from your intuition. And when you have that intuition and your guidance, then you engage in your mind. Like, I didn't know I was going to write a book, but I knew I was going to start writing essays. Well, I wrote the essays by using some of the tools that the mind brings. And yet the guidance is coming from the intuition. So this is a good example where a lot of people will talk about a conflict, where I try to talk about an embrace of these. I call them like two hands, one washing the other, each helping. If the mind has false ideas, it would be good to let them go. And if it's the inspiration, if it's your intuition that illuminates the false ideas, and you go, I see that this has been false, this is not serving me well, then you let it go. And also the mind can have false ideas about intuition and saying, I don't trust it. Well, the more you trust it, the more you allow it to bring its gifts to you. So there are other aspects of spiritual teachings that I think a lot of people will talk about some kind of conflict, or there'll be some kind of misunderstanding that I think with just a little bit of tweaking, some people may respond by going, I see. And so in this case, I'd like to say that both intuition and your mind are both your servants, your friends, your helpers that are trying to unfold this truth within you.
And from your point of view, is there a purpose to our existence? You mentioned there might be a personal path each one of us has.
Yes. This is a good question, because I already mentioned the idea of the actor and the character. Mm-hmm. And so the character lives inside a play or a movie or whatever it is. And in that context, that framework, the character has certain actions that are going about for a purpose. But from the perspective of the actor, that purpose is not really that important. It's not as essential for it. The character may be a murderer or maybe end up being murdered, but the actor knows that there's no one that's murdered. Isn't it said in, I think it's the Bhagavad Gita, where they say something there, no one is slain and no one slaves. This is a really tough teaching, because we look around and we see all of this, And what they mean is that the context of the play, yes, there's slaying and there's a slayer, but in a greater sense, there's a liberation from it going that way, because it's all coming and going. It's all just temporary. And the deepest reality, this true isness of who you are, this reality of source awareness, that's just a dream that comes and goes. And when you wake up from a dream, or wake up to a dream, both are possible, waking up to and waking up from, you realize that the substance of the dream isn't as important as you thought it was. It's just to be witnessed. And it can bring true emotion, real, genuine emotion. But it itself, like, for example, if you have a dream where you think that you're in danger and you wake up, it was just a dream. Some people incorrectly say it wasn't real. It was real as a dream. That's the nature of its reality. And it teaches you, not only it appears as if you escaped the danger, but the true message is that you were never in any danger. You appeared to be in danger. It was very scary, but there truly never was any danger, because who you truly are from the perspective of dreaming, nighttime dreaming, you're the body on the bed that cannot be hurt by the actions in the dream. And when you wake up to this reality, ordinary reality, being a type of dream, you wake up to your true self. Your true self is this source awareness, unaffected, unchanging. And yet, it still comes forth in the dream. It transcends the dream and comes forth within the dream as all these dream figures. The one self appears as, and that's a good word, appear. Appear means it's not really that way fundamentally. All of these selves are apparent selves. They appear to be separate. They appear to be individuals. They appear to be autonomous with their own will and their own power. But the will and power of God is just manifesting in them. The one will of God comes forth through the many wills of each person. Same with all the other things, the will, the power, your mind, the thoughts, your thoughts are God's thoughts coming forth through you.
What keeps us in a wrong understanding?
As the person is constructed to come forth in this world and witness and engage, they talk about the skandhas, the parts of the person, and Buddha goes through them, starting with the body, the form. Then there's the sensations, the perceptions, I see these colors. And then there's the sensations where you add a little more mental process. It says, I see these colors, and those colors are the video representation of Simon. And then there can be some emotional response to this. And so from there, but the last skandha is a sense, it's often said as a sense of being self. But really, I like to add the word fundamental. The sense that this self is fundamentally who you are. That this is so important, so constructed in such a way that it's not just a collection of things. Just like the character is not fundamentally who the actor is. This person is not fundamentally who you are. And yet it operates with the idea that this is fundamentally me and I need to protect it at all cost. You see what I mean? And as you gently work with that and you realize it's not fundamentally me, but it's a functional self with quotes around it because it's not really autonomous, but it is a functional self. So I say that the true self has no form, and yet it comes forth as all form. That is a non-fundamental self. One of the great teachers, Shankara, uses the words, he talks about this reality with qualities and the reality without qualities. Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. The reality without qualities is formless awareness, emanating as formful reality, reality with qualities, but it's the same reality. It's not a creation that comes away from the creator and has a different nature. The emanation makes it permeate, but it also transcends, so that as the creation dissolves, formless awareness doesn't lose any of its essence. And so, this feeling that this person, this human person, is you fundamentally, is put in place for a functional protection of the being, to go through life and not be careless and things like this. But it really is better, it softens up instead of being fundamentally who I am. It's just a functional tool of the divine. And then you realize that opening up this tool, this instrument of the divine, opening up to the love and the inspiration of God is really the only task. Because as the love comes in, it will not sit stagnant. It must flow out. And so this is what But if it doesn't come in to the tool, or if it gets detuned, so to speak, no longer in harmony with the higher values, it comes out in selfishness and smaller ways. But when you open up to the true vibration of God's love coming through you, it will just flow in and out and into the world all around you. This is why I have another essay that I really like, The Loving Heart of Enlightenment. Some people think that enlightenment leads to a detachment. And they think that this detachment means that you're closed off emotionally, you don't connect with people and things. No, you fully engage with people. You open your heart completely. And in this, you're free because you have no agenda that you're pushing. It all flows from God into the world. And yes, there can be heartbreak when you lose a loved one. That's another misunderstanding, that you'll always be happy. But when you cry because you lose something, it's okay. It's seen as a natural human emotion that's beautiful and profound and deep because you care.
So what I'm understanding, or what you're pointing to, is really an unconditional embrace to all kinds of experience that
Yes.
want
Yes.
to express or being experienced without a personal attachment to whatever it is.
Yes. Yes. Getting back to that word of attachment, it means when you wisely see that this is all a dream and that nothing in the dream has substance of its own that you need to get or you need to avoid, that's when you are liberated from grabbing and holding or pushing away. And this is the lack of detachment. This is when they talk about detachment, it really is both of those, grabbing or pushing away. And that's your liberation, stepping away from that. And so what God brings you is it's actually a reflection of the core beliefs that are within the person. And so these are the things that I'll use the word need, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but it needs to be purified if you're going to step up to higher vibrations. And so you want to purify the fear and things, the beliefs that lead to fear, like, oh, that guy may hurt me, so I need to protect myself and defend myself. As you let go of these fears and open yourself up, you find out that you don't need a shield and you don't need a sword. You just come in love.
And what you tell me if that's a correct interpretation, but what I'm also understanding is that whatever you perceive, it's not you. So you can't perceive yourself.
Yeah, it's not you fundamentally.
Yeah.
It's you in a non-fundamental expression, an expression that's transient and disappears. And so it's not essential to you, therefore it's not fundamentally you. Fundamentally you means who you are fundamentally is who you are when you remove all the layers of everything that's not essential. So your humanness, your spiritual nature, all the way up. And that's who you are fundamentally. But who you are non-fundamentally is you are everything. You are the totality. I say it kind of poetically in my book. I say you are the mountains, you are the rivers, you are the ocean, you are the sky, you are the sun, you are the stars, you are everything. But you're none of that fundamentally. You're none of that fundamentally, but you are that. You are every person. But that doesn't, sometimes people think, well, am I supposed to look to my murderous nature if I see a murderer? Is that what you're trying to say? No. Each individual person is a multiplicity, a coming forth of multiplicity of all kinds of qualities. And so the qualities can be quite different, but it's all an expression of the one who comes forth as the many.
That's beautiful. And I think I read that on your website, that you mentioned that you seldom refer to yourself as a non-dual teacher. Why is that?
at its core, I am a non-dual teacher. There's no question about that. And as I dug into this wisdom more and more, by simply going to Timothy's in-person satsangs and not going online, I started to write essays and things, which developed into the book. And I was so surprised when I said, oh, now that I have these essays and my website, a very little website at the time, and my website's not very big, especially compared to Timothy's, which is huge. I said, I'm going to go around on the internet and find some other non-dual websites and just kind of like a club where you're all thinking the same way. You go, if you live in a particular town or village and you go over to another town or village and you find a similar club, you go, hey guys, I'm just visiting from over here and I got this, this essay, maybe you want to read it. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. They're saying that there is no self, that you don't exist, that love, to tell someone that I love you shouldn't be done because it's a dualistic expression. I'm like, wow, this is just so different from what Timothy's saying. What's going on here? And it continued as maybe that was just a group that I didn't resonate with. I'll try and find another group. I never found any other groups, but I must admit that I didn't keep this activity up too long. But I realized that if I use the word non-dual, in fact, in my first edition of the book, the subtitle of the book was Ancient Non-Dual Wisdom for Today. Now, I thought that was a beautiful subtitle. It was still living the paradox of enlightenment. Ancient non-dual wisdom for today, meaning I'm going to be rooted in the ancient documents and teachings. I'm not going to be bringing forth some new, here's what Thomas says, and you've never heard it before. No, I'm going to be anchored in ancient ideas, and I'm going to bring them forward so that you understand how they apply today. And then I realized that when people read that word non-dual, they're instantly going to think that I say that you do not exist, and that nothing matters, and that you're stoic, without emotion, and I'm not like that at all. So, so I said, well, I'm going to need a new subtitle, and I'm just going to refer to myself as a spiritual teacher that likes to talk about enlightenment and spiritual awakening. So, I do have an essay that actually keys on some of the biggest differences that I have. Like we talked about the 5 components of the person. And Buddha went through them, the body, and he says, anatta, which is translated most commonly as no self. But what is a better translation is, this is not my fundamental self. The body is not me fundamentally. Then he goes to the perceptions and the sensations and the emotions and the sense of self. And he goes through them all. And you have to take it in context with a slight tweak, very slight tweak from there is no self to this is not my fundamental self. That's such a minor change in language translation, but a huge difference in meaning when you remove it from the context and you just say, no self. That means you don't exist. And you do exist. The question is, what do you exist as? In fact, I say in the beginning of the essay, The Loving Heart of Enlightenment, my first statement is, you know you exist. This, of course, is self-evident. Self-evident. It's not obvious as a thing because you don't look around and see. You think you look at yourself as an object and see, but when you really dig into the spiritual nature of it, you realize that you cannot see this open capacity for experience that you exist as. You exist as the power of sentience, which I also express as the open capacity for experience. Now, that's language that I'm getting from both Timothy, and Timothy's getting it from others. But this open capacity for experience, what a beautiful way of saying it, open. This open capacity for experience, also often confused with emptiness, shunyata, openness. Timothy says, and there's only a few of the Buddhist scholars that will translate that word as openness rather than emptiness. And I understand that emptiness is trying to get at something, and it can get at things in different ways, whether you're talking about the objects being empty of their own substance. And I like to add that phrase. Objects are not empty. They're empty of their own substance. They're not the source of anything. If you bang your shin against the table, there's substance there. It's the substance of the divine that's expressing itself as this apparent solidness of the physical world that we have. That's the substance. But the table is not bringing anything of its own. And the person itself, we often think that our personal consciousness is the source of its own power of sentience. But it's really, and there's much more to it, but it's really a window through which the one awareness looks. The one awareness is looking through my eyes. The one awareness is looking through your eyes. The one awareness is looking, and it doesn't give the power of sentience to Thomas so that I can autonomously perceive. You are this source awareness, this sentience, this open capacity for experience. What's coming through your eyes is not a part of source awareness. It's not a branch of source awareness. This source awareness has never individuated itself. This source awareness is always whole. This source awareness is looking through your eyes right now. Right now. All of it. The wholeness of it. And so when people say, we are all one, it's a beautiful thing. I like to expand it a little bit. In form, we are many. In other words, we appear to be many. But in essence, we are one. We are this source awareness. It's quite profound. And when you see it, and when you feel it, and you have an intuition of it, it starts to become more and more mind-blowing. It's just, when I go for a walk and I see the little flower, it's God's love and power coming forth and expressing as it. Now, creation is happening now. God didn't create everything 13 billion years ago and say, good luck, guys. He didn't create you as a little baby when you were born and say, okay, my work's done. I'm out of here. It's not. God is still fully involved, intimately involved. I'd like to say God is not only infinitely, intimately involved with your life. You are an expression of it. God is you. It's not a pretending. There's an isness. God is you. God is not pretending to be you. God is you.
And so what you pointed before at is one can get lost in an attachment to the experience or a detachment of the experience. And what I understand, what you're pointing at is maybe the middle ground of being in the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, the story of Buddha in the middle path. I'm not an expert in Buddhism by any means. But that middle path is so important. At first, Buddha is a prince and he gets all his needs satisfied. And yet, here he is expecting his first child with his wife. And he says, I'll see you later. And he takes off and he embraces a life of the most minimum existence, denying all desires, except for just a little tiny bit of food. But it was only when he went in the middle that enlightenment came. The world is not evil and doesn't need to be pushed away. And heaven is not far away and always something you strive for. This is heaven now. That's what's real. If heaven is where God is, and heaven is where God's laws are obeyed, this is heaven now, because no one can disobey God. This is all an expression of God. God is here, permeating and transcending, all in the world, but not of it, as they say it in the Christian language.
Do you want to awaken from doubt, anxiety, negativity to inner freedom? Do you dream of breaking free from the daily grind, endless hustle, poor relationships to outer freedom and really living a fulfilling life you truly love? Let me tell you, both are possible. It's my story and of many others that I helped, and it can be yours. Test it. Get my free newsletter where I share the proven keys to live free inside out. And when you work with, I don't know how you would call them, clients or people, or you provide guidance, what do you do? How do you guide someone or inspire someone to recognize what you're pointing at?
I like to work with people, and I like to work with them in person. Live in a room is my favorite, of course. But with technology and with my situation now, I live with my mother, and I've been living here 6 years, and I can't really go out very much. So I can't do so much now. And I never really was oriented towards a lot of email, detailed email. That's not me. I like to talk. I need to get in touch. I need to get a feel. And I offer all of this on a donation-only basis with a suggested donation amount of zero, because I just want to help people. And I don't want any barriers. I mean, that's the way Timothy was for everyone. You know, he didn't greet us with open hand going, you know, you gotta pay a little to get into the satsang here. No, it was welcome. So what I really like to do is work through the book. And I've done this a few times. I like to have a rhythm where once a week I meet for an hour, hour and a half, and everybody in the group will just step through the book. And when I finish, and just start over again. And if anyone else, new people come or whatever, and you know, some people drop out. And then once a week, I do more like office hours, open questions. And so then, and we can do some of that too when we go through the book too. I don't want it to be too rigid, but office hours where what's going on with you and, you know, what are you thinking about? And I really like to use the book as a springboard or the essays so that I can point them back to something that they can go to and maybe read again and listen to maybe some of the satsangs with Timothy. That was something I did. I listened to Timothy's satsangs over and over and over again. Some people would think, well, why would you do that? I mean, you know, one time through. In fact, some people say, he says the same thing every time. I meet people in Santa Barbara and they say, oh, you go to Timothy Conway? You know, I went to him and I went to him again and he said the same thing, so I'm not going anymore. And I go, well, okay. And this brings up the subject of a rightness, you know, a match between a teacher and a student. And they may be together for a while and then not. But when Timothy moved away from Santa Barbara, a friend of mine said, when the student is ready, the teacher will leave. And of course, that's the other bookmark. The beginning is when the teacher is ready, the teacher will come. When the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And then later, when the student is ready, the teacher will leave. You know, it's a funny thing to think about, but yeah. And that's one of my core beliefs, is that I always believed that I would be growing spiritually and that whatever was necessary for that growth would show up, whether it would be a book or a person or an experience or whatever it would be. So there's this trust that there's something going to happen, and it's a path, it's an individual path. It's not the same I'm not saying, okay, you got to go over to this location on the earth and have this experience. And although there are places to go that can be very inspiring. You know, Jeroen has gone, and Timothy also have gone many places where they would show up and they would sit and meditate and just go, wow, I can feel that there's been a lot here, you know, so.
And I found this reference also, I think it was in your book, and what you're also sharing this, I think you mentioned 3 things one can actually do. It's hearing,
yes.
pondering and then meditating. And
Yes.
you pointed again to this cognitive and intuitive aspect to
Yeah.
awakening.
Timothy mentioned that. I'm surprised he doesn't mention it more, but he mentioned it one time in one of the satsangs. Hear the truth, ponder the truth, meditate on the truth. And he said that this is ancient guidance from the oldest traditions. And I said, okay. The first, if there was someone kind of pushing back against this, they would say, well, how do you know it's really the truth? Are you going to, barking up the wrong tree here, I said, I'm going to put that aside because I have such a strong feeling that Timothy is presenting truth. And I'm going to trust that. And so I'm going to come every week and I'm going to hear the truth. Now, he was recording it on his own recorder, but I noticed that it wasn't showing up online or anything like that. So I started to record it with my own recorder. And then I made some CDs for people that were coming. And then eventually I posted it up on the internet and stuff like that. So other people can also hear. You hear it straight from Timothy the way I heard it. And then pondering. You take something that someone says and you think about it. And you think about it from every angle that you think brings some fruit to your wisdom. You think. And it can sometimes give you something to distill down to maybe, okay, I'm going to meditate on just one point. What does it mean? What does it mean to simply be source awareness, formless source awareness? What is that? Could it be looking out of my eyes? This meditation. So the book brings forth the 2 points. It offers my perspective. It invites many different ways of thinking about it, and hopefully the inspiration so that when someone puts the book down or the essays down, that they spend some time meditating on these. And as this happens, you'll have more things to think about, and there'll be a deepening. Timothy says that these, I'm not going to be able to go through this completely, but one of the ways that this truth deepens within you, it's kind of like a picture that's a little bit out of focus. And you're looking at it and you go, I think that's a picture of a hillside and a tree and, maybe there's a deer over there, but it's kind of fuzzy and you don't know. And it gets a little bit clearer and a little bit clearer. And when it's clear, now I see it, it's the hillside and it's, whatever it is. That's one way that this deepening can happen within you. But there are other ways too. Some of it can be all of a sudden, which was more for the sense of him when he was young, 16. He had some of these quick awakenings. And I do have a short essay called The 7 Key Spiritual Awakenings.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, if you find someone talking about spiritual awakening, I often ask, what are you awakening to? And if they start saying, well, it's too hard to put into words and you'll only know it when you have it and all this the guy doesn't know what's going on. If you're really clear on these awakenings, you will be able to articulate some of them. And so this is a very short essay, just 2 pages, because it points into all my other essays and things. But like the first awakening is that you have a soul. Originally, it looks like, from a materialist point of view, it looks like you're just a body. And that when you die, that's it. Time's up, game's over, it's all over. But when you read the books or have a personal experience, an out-of-body experience, you realize there's a spiritual dimension to this world. It's not just a companion, it's actually the source of it all. So there's a soul. And then the other awakenings just continue to unfold. Let's see if I can do them off the top of my head. 3 that I key on in the essay, The Loving Heart of Enlightenment, is that you exist as pure awareness rather than a body or a soul. Because when you awaken to a soul, when people have near-death experiences or near-death experiences with out-of-body experiences or whatever the combination is, people often get locked into that as their fundamental identity. This says, no, it's further. Go more, let go more. And you find that you are pure awareness. And then you find out that there's only one awareness. It's not your awareness. It's this awareness. The awareness that's looking out of your eyes is the awareness that's looking out of my eyes. There's only one awareness. So you are awareness. The third one is going to be there's only one awareness. And then you realize that this awareness is the source of everything that it witnesses. That's quite amazing. And then there's also the understanding of how it arises for the person. That the person's experience is a result of their core beliefs, their emotions, and their actions. That this is reflected in their experience. That's another awakening. Another awakening is that there's a difference between consciousness and awareness. Awareness is just the open capacity for experience. Just the power of sentience. Whereas consciousness is going to have some other capacities. For example, the mental capacities, remembering things, calculating things, logic, these kinds of things, capacity for emotion, so on and so forth. And another awakening is that your emotional experience, this bliss, is available regardless of outer circumstances. That's also a way of expressing the detachment principle. And you read the beginning of my book, so you might have read the essay with Tookie Williams about the deep sorrow.
Yeah.
In there was an experience of really being sorrowful, but yet also a little bit of a stepping back and witnessing the sorrow from a place that had a gentle peace to it, an okayness with it. This is human emotion. So there's this bliss that can hold all human emotions. So if people are interested, they can go check out some of those essays, or they can lead to a lot to work with.
Yeah, I will happily link them in the description of this conversation so our listeners can access them.
Very good.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, beautiful conversation with you. Thank you, so much for taking the time. And I know your private situation is a little bit challenging.
It's delicate. I need to be alert to my mom.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share this because it is my inspiration, and yet the real teacher teaches through example, and so it's important for me to know my role here. It's not to be out in the world engaged in this way at this time, and maybe in another time. So, and Timothy had a similar situation with he was taking care of his wife. She passed away about 1.5 years ago. But when Laura was still with him, he had to really take care of her, and he could not go out to, the workshops, seminars, conventions, all that kind of stuff. And I saw that, that he really, this is about love, taking care of your loved ones. And yet, at the same time, he was still completely dedicated to those weekly satsangs. If there was something in his schedule that might make it difficult for him to make those weekly satsangs, and we're talking about satsangs that are attended by 12 people, 15 people, he would still give his absolute very best to be there for us, to do that.
That's devotion. Thomas, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing this beautiful invitation and inspiration with us.
That's been my pleasure. And I also enjoy sharing your being here and what you have to offer and your peace and your wisdom, because it's all very important. And I want to acknowledge that too. It's a two-way street. There's a giving and a giving, and a receiving and a receiving. In truth, I honor your divine nature. Thank you so much, my friend. Until we meet again.
Yeah, until we meet again. Thank you so much. And I will also link to your website if that's fine.
Oh,
in the
yes, of
description,
course, yes.
So people
Yeah.
can look you up, and there's plenty of resources. We can also link to the book.
Very good.
Well,
Thank you so much for all your work.
thank you, Thomas. And also the audience, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Stay true to yourself and see you next time.
All right. Very good. You have a good day.